A home isn't just filled with furniture and memories, it's also filled with the energy of the people we allow in. And when you let someone who dims your light cross the threshold, your sanctuary stops being one. It becomes enemy territory. After a certain age, you can't afford to be naive. What you used to tolerate in the name of family, friendship, or "I don't want any trouble," now comes at a higher cost. Your peace, your health, your time. And if you don't decide in time who deserves to be close and who doesn't, you'll end up surrounded by people who drain you from the inside while smiling on the outside. This video isn't a call for rejection, it's a call for clarity. We're going to talk about 7 types of people who, if you don't learn to keep at a distance, will end up poisoning not just your home, but your soul. And the last one is the most dangerous because they disguise arrogance and judgment as wisdom. I'm Gabriel, and if you stick around until the end, you'll understand why protecting your space isn't selfish. It's the clearest form of self-love. Let's begin. Have you ever felt like you're carrying guilt that doesn't belong to you? Like you're hauling around stones others placed on your back, and you accepted them without saying a word? Sometimes it doesn't take shouting or insults for someone to break you from the inside. All it takes is an accusing glance, a sigh filled with reproach, or a comment disguised as a joke. And the hardest part is that it often doesn't come from an enemy, but from someone you know well. Someone you let into your home, your trust, your routine, and that's when the slow, silent, but steady erosion begins. The first type of person you need to keep away from your home is the one who blames you for everything and never looks at themselves. The one who turns every conversation into a trial where you're the defendant. The one who, no matter what you do, always finds something to criticize, a mistake to highlight, an emotional debt to remind you of. And you, out of habit, affection, or that old belief that being a good person means enduring everything, keep opening the door. But what you don't see is that every time they walk in, they leave behind a shadow that takes days to clear. Think of your mind as an altar and your home as a temple. If someone arrives with feet dirty from resentment, hands full of judgment, and a tongue poisoned with blame, do you really think you can still call that place your sanctuary? The real danger isn't what that person says. It's what they make you believe, that you're the source of their pain, that if only you did things differently, everything would be fine. It's a twisted game where you always lose, because the unspoken rule is that you're responsible for their unhappiness. Some time ago, a woman from the channel told me something I haven't been able to forget. She said, "Gabriel, my daughter visits me every couple of weeks, and every time she leaves, I feel worse. She tells me I'm doing everything wrong, that I'm difficult. That's why her kids don't want to see me. And I really try, but nothing is ever enough. I feel like I owe her something, but I don't know what." What I told her was simple, but necessary. You don't owe anything to someone who only shows up to collect. Epictetus taught that we must not give others power over our mood. And yet, when you let someone into your home to turn it into a courtroom, you're handing over that power without realizing it. That person isn't there to talk, they're there to pass judgment, and you are not to blame for someone else's unprocessed frustration. Let me be clear. Some relationships only exist because you keep them alive through guilt. And when you release that guilt, the relationship falls apart on its own. Because it wasn't built on love, it was built on obligation. It wasn't built on respect, it was built on pressure. Your home cannot be someone else's emotional dumpster, no matter the blood ties or shared history. And if you don't set that boundary, no one else will do it for you. Don't wait for the other person to change. Change the door you open. Change the silence with which you listen. Replace "maybe they're right" with "I don't deserve this." Because yes, you can love someone and still admit that their presence is harming you. And if it's harming you, it doesn't belong in your space. You too deserve to come home and feel relief, not tension. You deserve to breathe without having to explain every sigh. Remember this, someone who never looks at themselves isn't coming to share with you. They're coming to unload, and you are no longer here to carry what's not yours. The bravest thing you can do is close the door with respect and say, "Not here," because your peace is not for sale, because your home is sacred, because at this stage of your life, you don't need to justify your boundaries. You only need to stand by them. Sometimes the most harmful thing isn't what someone says, it's how they say it. What we just reflected on, those who blame you for everything, has a quiet but equally dangerous sibling, the person who controls you in the name of love, concern, or supposed care. And this is where many people get confused, because it's not always easy to tell the difference between someone who truly loves you and someone who limits you by disguising control as affection. We've reached the second key point in this video, the one who masks control as concern. It's that person who shows up with a gentle tone, kind gestures and phrases like, "I'm saying this for your own good," but who is really marking territory, making decisions for you, slowly erasing your ability to choose. And they do it so skillfully that even you may start to believe you wouldn't know what to do without them. The root of this problem runs deep. In many households of the past, control was mistaken for love. "I forbid you because I care. Don't go out because I worry about you. Do it this way because it's best for you." These phrases were etched into us as acceptable ways to relate. But over time, what looked like protection becomes a cage. And the worst part is that the cage might be built by someone you care about, someone who's been in your life for a long time. Control, when it wears the face of affection, is even harder to spot and harder to confront. Epictetus said, "Freedom is not having a fair master, but having no master at all." That ancient truth still holds today. It reminds us that even kindness, when it turns into dependence, ceases to be a virtue. There's a big difference between appreciating the support of someone who cares and giving up your decisions because you're afraid to upset them. And that's one of the most common ways people lose their inner power after 50. They give it away, out of fear of loneliness, criticism, or conflict. This kind of relationship wears you down in subtle ways. You stop doing things because he says you shouldn't. You cancel plans because she thinks it's not safe. You change how you dress, how you speak, even how you think, because that might upset them. And like that, without realizing it, you drift a little further away from yourself every day. You start dimming your light to avoid discomfort, to keep the peace, to avoid breaking a false harmony that only exists because you're erasing yourself. In everyday life, this shows up when you feel like you can't make a decision without checking first, without asking for permission, without having to explain yourself. Sometimes it's a partner, sometimes it's an adult child who acts like they own your time, sometimes it's a friend who meddles in everything. And you, just to avoid drama, give up the space that belongs only to you. But every time you do that, you're silently saying, "I can't do this on my own." And that's a dangerous lie. Emotional resilience begins when you reclaim your right to decide, even if it makes others uncomfortable. It's not about becoming cold or distant. It's about realizing that someone who truly loves you doesn't need to control you to feel secure. Love doesn't monitor, doesn't impose, doesn't manipulate. Love stands beside you, respects you, gives you room to breathe. When someone crosses that line, no matter how good their intentions may be, they are invading your freedom, and that cannot be allowed. Spiritually, there's also a clear truth. God gave you life not so others could manage it, but so you could live it with awareness. You weren't born to be a decorative piece in someone else's life. You were born to grow, to explore, to love from a place of freedom. And if someone needs to control every step you take to feel at peace, then they are not at peace with themselves. You don't have to carry that burden. Start paying attention to who limits you in the name of love. Ask yourself whether that person truly lifts you up or just holds you back. And above all, remind yourself that you're no longer here to obey without thinking. You're here to live with your own direction. Your home should be a place where your decisions are respected, not questioned, where your voice is heard, not corrected, where you decide how and with whom you want to live. Because at the end of the day, freedom isn't something you beg for or negotiate. It's something you live. And when you choose to keep out anyone who disguises control as concern, you're taking a powerful step toward the freedom you so deeply deserve. After talking about the invisible weight of envy and comparison, it's time to look at an even quieter, but just as corrosive, form of exhaustion. Because if there's anything more draining than hiding your light, it's feeling like you only exist when someone else needs something. So often, without realizing it, you turn your home into a pit stop for people who don't value you, they just use you. And the worst part is, you don't always see it at first. Their words sound affectionate, even desperate. Only you can help me. I don't know who else to turn to. If you don't take me in, I have nowhere to go. But behind those words lies a painful truth. That person isn't choosing you out of love. They're seeking you out of convenience. This is the fourth point in the video, and it's about the person who only shows up when they need something. It's that kind of connection that doesn't build presence, only shows up for favors. When things are going well in their life, they disappear. No calls, no check-ins, nothing to share. But when something goes wrong, there they are, knocking on your door with sweet words or urgency wrapped in affection. And you, with your kind heart and that learned instinct to always be available, open the door again. Not because you want to, but because you've been conditioned to believe that love means sacrifice. The mental trap here is one of the most common, especially in adulthood. The idea that being of service to others is your only source of worth. It's an emotional inheritance from generations past, where we were taught that your value depends on how often you're there for others, even when you're falling apart yourself. And while that kind of giving may seem generous in reality, if it's not mutual, respectful, and caring, it becomes a form of self-abandonment. Because there's a big difference between helping and letting yourself be used. And when help becomes a one-sided pattern, the price you pay is your vital energy. This pattern settles in slowly. It starts with a small favor, then an urgent request, and eventually a demand that doesn't stop. They tell you you're essential, but they don't appreciate you. They come to you for what you do, not for who you are. And bit by bit, your life fills up with small sacrifices. Sacrifices of your time, your rest, your plans. Until one day, you realize your routine revolves around everyone else's needs and not your own. The most damaging consequence of this trap isn't physical exhaustion. It's internal erosion. That emptiness you feel after doing yet another favor. That sadness you can't quite explain that shows up when you close the door and find yourself alone again. It's the pain of realizing you're not being loved, you're being used. And the cruelest part? Often, when you finally say no, that person vanishes like they were never there. That's when the truth becomes clear. They didn't love you, they needed you. And those are two very different things. From a Stoic point of view, every action should come from reason and balance, not guilt or a distorted sense of duty. Seneca spoke of the importance of choosing our relationships, not dragging them along out of obligation. Helping others is noble, yes, but only if it doesn't mean betraying yourself. And spiritually, there's another truth that can't be ignored. The soul doesn't grow when it gives out of fear, it grows when it gives out of conviction. You weren't put on this earth to be the emotional or practical support system for people who only know how to take. You were put here to live in peace, to choose who you share your life with, and to take care of the body and mind you've worked so hard to hold together. So if there's someone who only shows up when it benefits them, you are under no obligation to keep that door open. Charity doesn't mean erasing yourself. Self-love is also knowing how to say, "Not this time." Your home is not an emotional help center. It's your sacred space. And if someone doesn't know how to respect that, they don't deserve to cross its threshold. After talking about the invisible weight of envy and comparison, it's time to look at an even quieter, but just as corrosive, form of exhaustion. Because if there's anything more draining than hiding your light, it's feeling like you only exist when someone else needs something. So often, without realizing it, you turn your home into a pit stop for people who don't value you. They just use you. And the worst part is, you don't always see it at first. Their words sound affectionate, even desperate. "Only you can help me. I don't know who else to turn to. If you don't take me in, I have nowhere to go." But behind those words lies a painful truth. That person isn't choosing you out of love, they're seeking you out of convenience. This is the fourth point in the video, and it's about the person who only shows up when they need something. It's that kind of connection that doesn't build presence, only shows up for favors. When things are going well in their life, they disappear. No calls, no check-ins, nothing to share. But when something goes wrong, there they are, knocking on your door with sweet words or urgency wrapped in affection. And you, with your kind heart and that learned instinct to always be available, open the door again. Not because you want to, but because you've been conditioned to believe that love means sacrifice. The mental trap here is one of the most common, especially in adulthood. The idea that being of service to others is your only source of worth. It's an emotional inheritance from generations past, where we were taught that your value depends on how often you're there for others, even when you're falling apart yourself. And while that kind of giving may seem generous in reality, if it's not mutual, respectful, and caring, it becomes a form of self-abandonment. Because there's a big difference between helping and letting yourself be used. And when help becomes a one-sided pattern, the price you pay is your vital energy. This pattern settles in slowly. It starts with a small favor, then an urgent request, and eventually a demand that doesn't stop. They tell you you're essential, but they don't appreciate you. They come to you for what you do, not for who you are. And bit by bit, your life fills up with small sacrifices. Sacrifices of your time, your rest, your plans. Until one day, you realize your routine revolves around everyone else's needs and not your own. The most damaging consequence of this trap isn't physical exhaustion, it's internal erosion. That emptiness you feel after doing yet another favor, that sadness you can't quite explain that shows up when you close the door and find yourself alone again. It's the pain of realizing you're not being loved, you're being used. And the cruelest part? Often, when you finally say no, that person vanishes like they were never there. That's when the truth becomes clear. They didn't love you, they needed you. And those are two very different things. From a Stoic point of view, every action should come from reason and balance, not guilt or a distorted sense of duty. Seneca spoke of the importance of choosing our relationships, not dragging them along out of obligation. Helping others is noble, yes, but only if it doesn't mean betraying yourself. And spiritually, there's another truth that can't be ignored. The soul doesn't grow when it gives out of fear. It grows when it gives out of conviction. You weren't put on this earth to be the emotional or practical support system for people who only know how to take. You were put here to live in peace, to choose who you share your life with, and to take care of the body and mind you've worked so hard to hold together. So if there's someone who only shows up when it benefits them, you are under no obligation to keep that door open. Charity doesn't mean erasing yourself. Self-love is also knowing how to say, "Not this time." Your home is not an emotional help center. It's your sacred space. And if someone doesn't know how to respect that, they don't deserve to cross its threshold. Some silences hurt more than a scream, and some conversations, though they seem harmless, slowly poison the way you see yourself. We've reached the fifth point in this video, and it's time to talk about the one who disguises gossip as conversation. That person who sits down with you over a cup of coffee, says they just came to chat, but really came to plant seeds of doubt, judgment, and division. They do it subtly, with a confidential tone, as if sharing a secret. But behind every word is an intention you don't always catch right away: to fracture connections, manipulate emotions, and pull you into a web of toxicity disguised as interest. The damage this person causes runs deep. They pull you into a dynamic where speaking poorly of others becomes normal, even entertaining. And without realizing it, you start to take part, to nod along, to repeat what you've heard. But every time you do, you lose something more valuable than your time. You lose your center. Because once malice settles into your conversations, it starts seeping into your perspective. You begin to distrust, to judge, to assume the worst about those around you. And the most dangerous part is that you start to accept this distortion as just part of everyday life. What seems like an innocent social habit, sitting down to catch up, is often a destructive practice that weakens your real relationships. Because when you get used to speaking about others behind their backs, you also start to fear that others are doing the same to you. And then your world fills with suspicion, with masks, with unnecessary tension. You end up surrounded by fragile relationships where trust is wounded and loyalty is just a word. That's the silent price of keeping someone close who uses gossip as a bridge to connect. Undoing this pattern isn't easy. It's not just about changing the subject or pretending you didn't hear. It's about making a radical decision, not to be an accomplice to the poison. And that decision begins with a hard but necessary question. What part of you needs that kind of conversation to feel included, validated, or entertained? Because gossip only thrives where there's internal space to welcome it. If your life is lacking in purpose, in healthy silence, in authentic relationships, then it's easy for the superficial to pull you in. But that doesn't mean you have to accept it. The mindset you need is that of a guardian of your inner temple. It's not about judging the one who brings the poison, it's about recognizing that you don't have to drink it. You can say clearly, "I'd rather talk about things that build, not things that destroy." You can set a boundary without offending, but with firmness. And most importantly, you can choose to surround yourself with people who use their words to heal, not to harm. Because what you hear shapes you. And if everything that enters your ears is loaded with judgment, criticism, or envy, your soul will eventually suffocate in an environment it never asked for. Accepting these dynamics as normal is surrendering. It's giving your dignity space over to mediocrity. And you, who've lived so much, who've survived so many battles, cannot afford to keep sharing your peace with someone who turns it into noise. Talking badly about others doesn't make you strong. It makes you an accomplice to destruction. And your time, your energy, your journey at this stage of life deserves something higher. Breaking this habit isn't easy, but it's possible, and it's worth it. Because when you choose not to engage in gossip, you're not just protecting your home, you're cleansing your soul. Conversation is a sacred ritual. Let what you say build something, and let what you allow yourself to hear never pull you away from who you are. You weren't born to echo noise, you were born to find clarity. And clarity begins when you shut out those who only know how to pollute it. After so much time letting certain voices stain your soul, It's only natural that your space starts to reflect those voices. The noise of gossip, the presence of those who only come around when they need something, the constant comparisons, all of that begins to wear down your routine, your spirit, your ability to breathe. That's why it's time to talk about something even more urgent: respect for your boundaries. We're now at the 6th point in this video, and we need to talk about the one who ignores your limits and imposes themselves on your space. That kind of person who doesn't understand pauses, who doesn't respect your time, who thinks that just because they know you or think they have some claim over you, they can show up whenever they want, stay as long as they want, and offer opinions as if your life belonged to them. And you, out of habit or guilt, keep opening the door. I want you to visualize something for a moment. Imagine your home as a private garden. In that garden, each plant represents a part of you: your peace, your goals, your memories, your rest. Now imagine that every time this person shows up, they trample your plants, stir up the soil, disrupt the order you've worked so hard to maintain. They don't ask for permission. They don't check if they're welcome. They just show up. And you, afraid of seeming rude, say nothing. You let it happen, even though you know something inside you is breaking. Because the damage isn't just the visit itself, it's the loss of your say over your own space. When someone crosses your boundaries like it's nothing, it's not just a lack of respect. They're training you to feel like you don't have a right, to accept the unacceptable, to live as if your time, your home, your choices belong to everyone but you. And if it happens often enough, it becomes the norm. You can't enjoy silence because they interrupt it. You can't rest because they show up unannounced. You can't decide how to spend your day because someone else already decided for you. And the worst part is that, over time, you start to believe that's just how life is, that you don't have a choice, that it's part of being there for others. But that belief is a lie built on years of self-abandonment. You are not here to play the role of the person who never sets boundaries. You didn't reach this stage of life to become a revolving door, a permanent host, a space that anyone can invade. You're here to find peace, direction, and dignity. And none of those things can grow where there's no respect for your limits. This truth is uncomfortable, but it's necessary. If you don't draw the line, no one will. And if you keep letting others decide what happens in your space, you'll end up without space at all. No clarity, no voice, no sense of self. The consequences are obvious. Daily frustration, the feeling that you're always on call for someone else, loneliness even when you're not alone, and a quiet resentment that builds until one day it erupts unexpectedly. But it doesn't have to be this way. You can start changing the dynamic, not with yelling, not with dramatic cutoffs, but with calm, steady firmness that says, "I decide here." That lets you say, "Not today," without guilt. That gives you permission to close the door without needing to explain. That returns your space to something sacred, not out of isolation, but out of self-respect. Don't get it twisted. Setting boundaries isn't about being harsh. It's about being fair with yourself. It's about claiming the space you deserve. Because if you don't protect your environment, your body and your spirit will show you the cost. And at this point in life, that cost is too high. You're no longer here to keep giving in to everything. You're no longer here to keep tolerating what deep down you know is hurting you. You're here to live with intention, with inner order, with self-respect. And if someone doesn't understand that, they don't need to be close. It's that simple and that necessary. After speaking about the respect you deserve in your own space, it's time to go even deeper. Because it's not enough to set boundaries with those who impose themselves physically. You also have to learn to shut the spiritual door on those who present themselves as guides, but only plant guilt, arrogance, or judgment. We've arrived at the 7th point in this video, and it's time to talk about the one who speaks of spirituality but acts with superiority. This is the person who seems to have all the answers, who quotes books, who mentions God in every other sentence, but in practice uses their wisdom to place themselves above others. They speak to you with a tone of condescension, as if your path were lesser, your faith incomplete, your life lacking meaning without their approval. And if you're not paying close attention, you might start to believe them. Because judgment disguised as virtue is harder to spot. It's a trap that preys on your sincere desire to grow, to understand, to find peace. But what they offer isn't guidance, it's control. This kind of person slips into your days with phrases that seem uplifting, but actually diminish you. If you were more spiritual, you wouldn't get angry. That feeling comes from not forgiving. You need to accept everything with humility. And you, not wanting to seem closed-minded, not wanting to look ignorant, afraid of being rejected, begin to give in. You start to question yourself for feeling sad, for setting boundaries, for speaking up when something bothers you. And little by little, you begin to disconnect from your inner compass, that voice that clearly tells you what's right and what's not, but that you silence, because someone else convinced you their truth matters more than your own. This is where I want you to pause and be honest with yourself. How many times have you ignored your intuition out of fear of disagreeing with someone who seemed to know more? How many times have you kept quiet just to avoid an argument with someone who claims to speak for God, but spends their time judging everyone around them? This isn't about rejecting spirituality, it's about recognizing that not every voice claiming to speak of faith comes from the light. And if someone needs to diminish you to feel enlightened, they aren't wise, they're insecure. True transformation begins when you stop looking outside for what you already know inside. When you understand that no one is coming to validate you, to save you, to guide you, unless you take responsibility for yourself. And yes, maybe you'll make mistakes. Maybe you won't always get it right. But that's your journey. And no one has the right to make you feel small for not having all the answers. Because true wisdom doesn't judge, it supports. It doesn't point fingers, it listens. It doesn't impose, it offers. What you need isn't a speech filled with pretty phrases. What you need is truth. And the truth is that you can no longer keep listening to someone who makes you feel small. Your life isn't a mistake that needs to be fixed by others. It's a story only you can write. And if today you choose to shut the door on that voice that parades as enlightened but lives in judgment, you'll be making the most powerful move of all, protecting your soul. Because your faith doesn't need intermediaries, because your dignity isn't up for debate, because your silence is worth more than any sermon dressed up as a lesson. Stop giving your attention, your time, your energy to someone who only wants to feed their ego at your expense. Not anymore. Now you know better. Now you see more clearly. And even if it hurts, even if it's hard, even if you're left with the silence that used to be filled by those voices, know this: that silence is fertile ground where your true peace can grow. And that peace, when it arrives, won't come from borrowed words. It will come from finally choosing what truly resonates with you. You've made it to the end of this video, and that says more about you than any words could. Not everyone sticks around when the truth gets uncomfortable. Many prefer entertainment, soft messages, pretty phrases that don't stir anything inside. But not you. You chose to sit with the discomfort because you understand that real change only comes from facing what's hard. Today, we talked about the kinds of people who need to be kept out of your home, not out of disdain, but out of self-respect. Because continuing to allow certain presences in your life is the same as slowly giving up your peace, your energy, your clarity. And at this point in your life, That's a cost you can't afford. This message isn't meant to soothe. It's a warning, a guide, and a call to action. Because now that you've seen clearly the faces of those who drain your strength, you can't pretend you don't know. Transformation begins the moment you accept that responsibility, without guilt, without excuses, without needing to explain yourself to anyone. You decide who gets to enter. You choose which voices are worthy of sharing your space. And if that leaves you with fewer people around, so be it. Better to be alone than poorly accompanied. Better a life of silence than a home full of voices that don't respect you. If what you heard today resonates with you, I'm going to ask something simple but powerful. Write in the comments, "My home deserves respect." And let me know what country you're watching from. That way, I'll know you're part of this community, one that doesn't just listen but acts. I'm Gabriel, and this space, the Stoic Garden, exists for one reason: to help you find your direction again when others try to dim your light. Here we don't sugarcoat the truth. We speak from strength, from philosophy, from the kind of truth that may be hard, but always frees. Because you weren't born to be invisible or useful or someone's emotional crutch. You were born to live with dignity. And that begins with deciding what you allow into your life. If you haven't yet, I invite you to subscribe. This channel isn't for entertainment, it's a wake-up call. Every video is created not to distract, but to guide you with clarity. Share this message with someone who needs to stop asking for permission to feel peace. Sometimes, a single video can be the first step out of years of silent exhaustion. And if this was your first time here at the Stoic Garden, don't let the conversation end here. Stick around and choose one of the 2 videos that will appear on your screen. You might just find the next truth you need to hear.